Welcome to IRO Live with host Bob Bay.
I don't want to add anything and tell you, okay, this is what the Bible says if it doesn't say that. In the same case, there are things that the Bible talks about that we can look at it and draw from and get several different things from it. It can mean several different things. It could have, just because it means this doesn't mean it can't mean this. And so we're going to talk about that. So last week I had started talking about, we were in Exodus, and we've been walking through this journey of God bringing us out of Egypt, through the Red Sea, and into the wilderness, which sounds like a really bad thing. But the thing is you have to go through the wilderness to get to the promised land. For those of you who haven't been following along, the promised land, God promised them that he would take them to a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, if you don't like milk, if you're lactose intolerant, and you don't like honey, then I don't know what to tell you. It's figurative to speak of into a land where there is a richness to it, where there is a fullness, a thriving, this place of promise where God is meeting our needs. He's taking care of us. Remember the three categories of needs: significance, security, and socialization. That's relationships. And so he's meeting all of our needs through that. In that process, we read in Exodus that there's this journey, and there are different steps to this journey. Honestly, I can't say that everyone will follow the same steps, but it kind of, the same order of steps. But it seems as if over the many years that I've been doing this, and it seems as if what I read in the Bible, as if there should be a basic pattern to this that we see. I had begun to talk about thirst last week. If you haven't been here, God brought them through the Red Sea. They traveled for 3 days, had no water, and then they came to Marah. There was a spring there, but it was bitter. The water was bitter. In other words, it was poison. They couldn't drink it. And so they complained to Moses. Why'd you bring us out here? They complained at the Red Sea, remember? Why'd you bring us out here for us to just die? God took care of it. Then they come to the spring. Why'd you bring us out here for us to die of thirst? God took care of it. Showed Moses the tree. He threw the tree into the water, and it made the water sweet. And I'm sorry I keep recapping, but it kind of reinforces the ideas and the basis of it. We talked about the idea that when God showed Moses the tree, it represented the cross, that we would later on see as the cross. And when the tree was thrown into the water, it made the springs sweet. They were able to drink of it then. In studying for this and talking to God about this, when I talk about thirst, what is thirst? You guys ever been just like really thirsty? I work outside sometimes, and I've had times where it was like 104. I drink all my water by 10 o'clock in the morning. Come 1 o'clock, I ain't right. My muscles are all cramping up. At one time, it was in that situation. I don't know how I made it home. I don't know how I drove home. I should have stopped. The responsible thing would have been to stop and get some water, but I was just like, I got to get home. I was thirsting so bad. To describe that, here are some of the words that you can equate to and you can parallel with that. Thirst equaling a desire. Now, I know these first two when I say a desire or lust, lusting after. I know that evokes sensuality, but those words don't necessarily have to just do with that. Craving or a longing. It's an unsatiableness. Sometimes you can be a little bit thirsty. Like there's a pizza place that has a special on Wednesday nights. They have these big pizzas in there. I love the pizzas, but they must put a lot of salt in them because I eat that pizza and man, it makes me thirsty. I'm drinking water for the rest of the night after we have pizza there. That makes me thirsty. That's not really the thirst that I'm talking about. Can you guys, are you with me? Can you picture something in your life, this thirst? I also connected it to in our lives in the world. I don't want to trigger anybody, but I remember a particular day, not too long before I quit doing meth. I was supposed to be at work, and I had been really dropping the ball as far as work goes. This is 30-some years ago. I had been really dropping the ball at work. Had I not been in the Army, I would have been fired. But I was in the Army, and I was good at pretending. I was good at making it look like I was taking care of stuff. But I had a bad meth problem. And I remember this one particular morning. I was supposed to be at the flight line. I was supposed to be working. And I just had to go get some meth. I just had to. There was nothing I could do. I remember this anxious, just this thing of, I have to. I had no choice. Which is ridiculous, right? But if you've been there and you know. I had to. I didn't really have a choice in the moment. And people who haven't been there would say, oh, you always have a choice. It's a choice. Maybe I did have a choice. But at that moment, I craved it so bad, it was as if I didn't have a choice. And I remember I was crying because I did not have it in me to say no. And I was driving to this guy hoping that he had some so that I can get it. I'd already destroyed everything. I had traded Pam's car away for drugs. I begged, borrowed, and stole everything I could. Everything was ruined. I was hanging on by a thread, and it didn't matter. The consequences of that didn't matter. I had to go. You with me? That's a desperate thirst. It's a horrible place to be. A horrible place to be. Again, I'm sorry if that stirs up in you feelings of those times, but it's important that we recognize that. Really, thirst, whenever you connect it with the things in the Bible, it's connected with a deep need or a longing for meaningful connections. Not just love, but a connection. We have in us, and we may not even realize that's what's going on inside of us, but we have this need, and there have been studies done that one of the root causes for addiction is a lack of ability to make meaningful connections. I don't know if that stems from when you're growing up. I don't know if it stems from trauma or abuse or just whatever it may be, but just this inability to make meaningful connections. But I remember as a teenager, I had all kinds of people that you would, from the outside, you would look and you would say they are his friends. But I felt so alone all the time. I never felt like I was able to connect with the people around me. And I didn't realize, I wasn't mature enough to understand that I needed that. I had this longing for connection. I had this longing for connection with my parents. I had a longing for connection with the people around me, with my friends. I had this longing for connection, but I never seemed to be able to get it. Instead of me understanding that's what it was and working on that, I just did the things that I needed to do to not feel that way. And that's when alcohol came in, when I was 15. And when I drank, it took away that emptiness. You know what I'm saying? That lack of connection. I just felt like everything was just fine and everything was wonderful and everything was going to be okay. I felt like I was able to just be me. I was able to just let go and be me, and I could connect with everybody around me. I felt like I was the life of the party. And that might have been the case for the first 3 parties. But after those first 3, I was just the blackout, ignorant drunk. John chapter 4, verse 9, starting in verse 9. And it says, "A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.' For his disciples had gone away." I'm reading from the New King James Version. Disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealing with Samaritans." And Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it was who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." And the woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and livestock?" And Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water, springing up into everlasting life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." And Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." And the woman answered and said, "I have no husband." And Jesus said to her, "You have well said, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you have now is not your husband. In that you spoke truly." Now let me connect this. The Bible doesn't lose the opportunity to share things. It shares a lot of things in there. It gives a lot of details. And that's why I said starting out that there's a lot of times we have to look at things and we don't want to read in and say that it's saying something that it's not. But we can look at this and say, there is a truth here. And so just like I talked about this thirst that everyone goes through, this lack of being able to make meaningful connections. And then Jesus comes to this woman and he says to her, "I have a water that will take care of your thirst." I'm paraphrasing now, right? "I have a water that will take care of your thirst." Because he says that I have seen that you've been married 5 times. The guy you're with now is not your husband, so this is the 6th guy. And you have a thirst within you, a longing for connection, a longing for meaningful relationships, and you're not finding it. You keep trying, but you're not finding it. Now, we don't know the backstory of all of this, but there's a reason why they talk about this. And Jesus gives this answer. Listen, you're thirsty, and I have the answer for what you need. And if you go back to the story in Exodus, we see, and I'm not going to go into detail about all of that. You go back to the story in Exodus, I'm going to paraphrase this, and he says, listen, that this is what I want you to do. I want you to, in all of these situations, I want you to turn to me and follow my ways. Follow me. God is saying this to the Israelites, the children of Israel. God is saying this. You do this, and I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to keep harm from coming to you. The harm that came to you, that came to the Egyptians, I'm going to protect you from that. He's putting he called it a statute, but he's putting boundaries on this to say, listen, this is your fence, and as long as you stay inside this fence, you're going to be safe. If you leave the fence, you're on your own. I know that's kind of a hard thing, but it's the truth of it. Let me bounce back. It goes on, and Jesus says other things to her, and they're talking about worshiping, and he actually tells her to go tell the people. And so she goes into town, and she tells to all the people in town, she says, listen, this guy's got to be the Messiah that we're looking for, because he told me everything about my past. She doesn't just say he told me about being married 5 times and the guy I'm with not being. He says he knows everything about me. And so she goes and she tells all these people and says, you got to check this guy out. But so while all of that is happening, the disciples come back. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. That's in starting in 31. He says, I have food to eat which you do not know. And therefore the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him anything to eat? And Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. So Jesus just went through talking about thirsting and having this water that this woman didn't understand. And now he tells the disciples, I have a food Now let's bounce back to the Exodus story. All right? So we've come through the Red Sea. We've come to Marah. God provides water for the people to drink. Even after they complained, he still took care of it. And he gave them boundaries, and he says, listen, I'm going to take care of you, but you got to stay within the boundaries, okay? And he's doing that to teach them, to show them where they're at, so that they can understand their relationship with him. He's not doing it as a punishment or just rules just for fun. He's doing it so they can understand where they're at with him. Then the next thing comes, and that's in Exodus chapter 16. In chapter 16, it says, and they journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which that sin is capitalized. I don't think they're not saying the wilderness of sin like sinning. It's a place, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, and they departed from when they departed from the land of Egypt. Then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the children of Israel said to them, Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. You guys, reading this story, if you read this story and you think about it, and you think about, okay, so God just delivered them from 400 and something years of slavery in Egypt, miraculously, and so they complain at the Red Sea. He miraculously brings them through that. Then they complain because they're thirsty. He takes care of that. And now they're like, God, you should have just killed us when we were in Egypt, because we had all the food we wanted, and we could eat all the meat and bread we wanted. And it's like a joke, you know what I'm saying? You look at it and you think, well, that's crazy. Why would they do that? But we do that all the time. We complain about stuff all the time. I'm laughing about it, but it's really sad. I have to laugh not to cry myself. Because I get into these situations. It's like, God, why is this like this? Why do I got to go through this? God, why? And I know I'm not the only one. But so we talked about what thirst was. Now, what's hunger? Because we're on this path, this journey of these phases that we have to go through in wilderness to find our promised land. So what is hunger? It's an emptiness, a lack of fulfillment, a need for nourishment, hollowness. Remember when we talked about the needs that God created within all of us? We have to keep saying them so that we get it down in us. The need for significance, the need for security, and the need for relationships or socialization. Part of that security and significance is having purpose and meaning in our lives. When we have no purpose and meaning in our lives, we will do things to fill that emptiness, to find purpose and meaning. Or when we can't find that, we will do things to cover the pain, to numb us from the pain. Be that drugs, be that bungee jumping, be that shopping, be that whatever it may be. Anything, as long as we don't have to experience that emptiness, that hunger. Now, if you think about it, if thirst is that unquenchable desire for that connection, hunger is an emptiness of purpose and meaning. And so, again, God gives, I'm going to paraphrase this, but it's in Exodus 16. So what does God do? Many of you guys know, if you watch the old Charlton Heston 10 Commandments, when the children of Israel are out in the wilderness and they're hungry, what does God send them? Manna. He has it rain down manna, which actually means, what is this? If you translate it, it means, what is this? Because it was like a goo or whatever, and they would collect it up and they could make bread out of it, and they can make different things out of it. At night, he sent quails every night to give them meat. So they had meat at night and manna in the morning. But this is the thing that he said. They can only gather enough manna for that day. Can't gather any more? You shouldn't gather any less. Don't worry about it. Get all you need for that day according to who you are. And I think it's like a fat or something. There's this measurement. I'm not going to look at it. There's a measurement that each one of them per person would gather per day. If you gathered more than you needed, it would rot at night. Now, this is what God said again. He made a statute and a law to test them to see if they would follow what he said. To say, I'm only going to give you this much, don't gather any more. And on the 6th day, gather 2 days worth, because I ain't sending any on the 7th day. That's your day of rest. On the 6th day, you get 2 portions of it. And I'm going to see if you guys follow me, if you follow instructions. Right? Now that may seem really ridiculous, but when you stop and you think about it, if you're a parent, or if you've ever been parented, I think that covers most of us. If you're a parent or you've ever been parented, there are certain things you need to do to raise a child to become productive members of society. There are certain things that need to happen to help them grow. One of the things that we've been talking about since in the beginning of the year, you can go back and listen to the podcast, talking about learning to walk in the consequences of our choices and how hard that is to walk in the consequences of our choices. Because you guys, that 8-year-old kid throwing the fit in Walmart because he can't have that toy truck is feeling his feelings. Those feelings are real. They don't understand. And at 8 years old, it's not their fault. They need someone to help them deal with that and understand. Because later on, if they get their way, if somebody caves into that and they get their way and they learn that there are no consequences to choices, then they become teenagers and young adults that don't know how to walk in consequences. And then what ends up happening is they go to work and things aren't the way they think they should be, and they get fired. And they don't understand because their feelings are real. You guys, this is important. Your feelings are real to you. They may not be right, but they are real. If your heart is hurting, that hurt is real to you. If you feel that you are walking in injustice and the world is unfair to you, that is very real. You need Jesus to take you by the hand and walk you through the process of understanding you and how you cope and how you deal with your feelings and emotions so that you can handle them in a way that God intended us to handle them. I'm not saying you need to learn how to act right. I'm not saying you need to act this way or that way. Your life may have been a tragic, horrible situation, but it's your life. And so we have to say, okay, today is the first day of the rest of my life. And I've lived a train wreck till now. And I've had all of this horrible stuff happen to me. And it was unfair. But from this point on, God can walk me out of this. And it doesn't have to be this way anymore. And that's what journey we're on in this wilderness experience. A lot of people have this aha moment and this heavens opening experience, and they have an encounter with God. That's what happened to me. I was hooked on meth, destroyed everything. Everything was ruined. I talked about that. Lied to Pam. Pam was ready to leave me. Everything was just horrible. And I had an encounter with God, so I knew he was real. But this was the thing. I suddenly had this experience. I'll tell you about it one day. It's in my book. I had this experience with God. I began to know he was real out there. He's out there. But listen, I didn't have anybody to walk me through it. It took me another 5 years, actually almost 10 years, of wandering around in the wilderness, making dumb choices, trying to live with my coping skills and the things that I had learned in my dysfunction, and trying to make that. I drug those into my new life and tried to use those tools to live life. And I couldn't, because they don't work. I walked around offended, hurt, resentful, bitter, all of those things. And I didn't understand because I believed in God. I believed that he loved me. I just couldn't understand why he was punishing me and why everything was going on. If he forgave me, why is he doing all of this stuff to me? I didn't understand that as much as he was wanting to bring me out of the wilderness, in my fear of losing my coping skills and me holding on to those, I was destined to wander in the wilderness. Many of you guys might have heard this journey in the wilderness. They came out of Egypt, and there are different people say different amounts, but a lot of people believe that from the time they reached the Jordan River and they're given the opportunity to cross in, it was an 11-day journey to get to the promised land. But they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years because of the hardness of their hearts. Because the old ways, I'll say the old people, but I hesitate to use that word because it's not that way for us. Because the old ways had to die off. They had to be put aside. They had to be let go so that they can cross in, because the battles you have to fight in the wilderness are bad. But the battles you have to fight in the promised land are even more important. Oh wait, the promised land, that's in heaven, right? We're supposed to be floating on clouds, playing the harp. No. The promised land is where we have to fight the Battle of Jericho, where we find out our failures, the battle of Ai, and just all of this stuff where as mature believers, we're walking in the promises, but we still have battles we have to fight. If you go forward into Matthew chapter 6, when we talk about hunger, the disciples had asked Jesus, "Hey, Jesus, teach us how to pray." And Jesus says this, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Remember, we're talking about walking in the kingdom, right? That the promised land is a foreshadowing of the kingdom. And the kingdom is a post-shadowing of the Garden of Eden and the kingdom to come. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then what? Give us this day our daily bread. Not give us this day my groceries for the week. Give us this day our daily bread. Because what then do we end up doing? We end up trusting and relying on God. And we come to the point where we understand we can't depend on ourselves. None of us can. We can't depend on ourselves. We have to trust in God. But that's a good thing, because even in the wilderness, even through their complaining, through their whining and complaining, God still met their needs. He had to discipline them at times. That's not punishment. Discipline is when you do things to create discipline, self-discipline in someone. You teach them discipline. And so he would do things, and we're going to talk about those things. He would do things to create in them a discipline. He didn't punish them for it. He loved them through the situations. So this week as we're going through, we need to be thinking about that purpose and meaning in our lives, if we're lacking purpose and meaning. And what are we doing to try and feed that hunger for purpose and meaning that's outside of what God would provide for us? When he says, pray, give us this day our daily bread. If you go to James chapter 4, James is saying, hey, listen, you have not because you ask not. And when you do ask, you ask amiss to use on your own selfish desires. We need to be asking God for what we need for today. Now, when Jesus talks about, when he says, give us this day our daily bread, there are things that God's called Pam and I to do that it's going to take resources. We go to the park every Saturday. It takes money to do that. We have to have things to do that, to pay for the food, to pay for different things, the trailer, the chairs, all the stuff. We're getting a new sound system for down there. There's things we have to do. And so part of that is we ask God to give us what we need now so that we're set up for the next phase. And you guys all have things in your lives. We want to deal with the past and prepare for the future while living in today. Deal with the past, prepare for the future while living in today. And part of that is, ask God, if you're in a situation where you need things to be taken care of in housing, and maybe in a car, and whatever it is, ask Him. Ask Him. We need to be asking for God to meet our needs because He wants to do it. He wants to meet our needs. He wants to take care of us. We just need to ask Him and then be open for what He places before us. Not have preconceived ideas like saying, I should be driving a brand new truck. God, just take care of me. Give me what I need. And sometimes He'll give you nicer things because He knows you need them. We've come to this point. We've come to the point where we go through the Red Sea and we make a decision. I'm going forward. I'm not going back. I'm not going back to Egypt. I'm going forward into the wilderness, even though it's scary and I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going forward. And I'm thirsty, and I haven't had any good water to drink in 3 days. And I'm a little bit upset with God about it, but I'm going to trust Him because He'll provide the water for me. Sometimes I still have those times of feeling alone. Remember we talked about the thirst. Sometimes I feel like I'm not making meaningful connections. But I just go to God and say, God, what is going on? And just like we talked last week about learning to love more, I'm learning to be more lovable. Day by day, I'm learning to be more lovable so I can make meaningful connections and I'm not making people mad all the time. You guys, I just want you to look towards God with that. It's natural to hunger and thirst. It's natural to be afraid. It's natural to be angry about things. But we take those things to God because He will take care of it for us. He will walk us through that process so that we will no longer thirst. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that point where I no longer thirst. You guys, I meet some of the neatest people in the park on Saturdays. I meet some of the neatest people and make connections with some of the neatest people. And God's helped me to do that. I don't have to be all quiet and introverted and guarded and afraid. I can just be me, which I couldn't be me when I started this journey. I never thought it would be okay to be me. That's why I wore a mask all the time and pretended to be somebody I wasn't.
Thanks for listening. Please comment and subscribe for upcoming podcasts. To order your copy of My Real Life, go to the Take Action page at our website, reallifeministries-stl.com, or go to Real Life Ministries STL on Facebook.